The real enemy of misfits, people who don't fit in, people who are different. Now, first of all, before I even go anywhere, different does not mean you're a failure. Different just means that you color outside the lines because you see the different, bigger picture than anybody else. And so when the problem is that the world that is a little bit more uniform in certain ways, in many ways it's very different, is then if you're different, will try to make you fit in. Not a good thing. And the one of the biggest enemies of understanding, realizing that you're a misfit and honoring the fact that you are is actually Saly. I'll explain. It's an accounting concept, but you'll have fun with it. Saly stands for same as last year. So when I worked for a firm, um, every conversation with for a tax return, whether it's with the manager or a partner on the account, started with Saly. Okay, look at how we did it last year. I'm of the mindset that when I look at something, when I'm learning something, I always look for why do we do certain things. Think about it this way. There's so many tax preparers. You don't need a license to be a tax preparer, by the way, nor do you need a license to be a bookkeeper, or education for that matter. But so many tax preparers think that they know what they're doing when they're preparing tax returns, especially business returns. Like that scares me because there's so many questions on that tax return that you, as the owner of the business, sign under penalties of perjury. And if you don't pay attention to answers to those questions, you can really mess some things up. Some of them can be fixed, some of them cannot. Some of them are forever. And especially when someone's not licensed, you can't tell the government that you could reasonably rely on that person because they were not licensed. Maybe they don't have enough experience and stuff like that. Because there is relief for some businesses who have messed some stuff up on taxes where they could reasonably rely and did rely on a preparer. Now, reasonably rely means that that preparer had, let's say, X number of years of experience and did this and then that, had those licenses and things like that. So that reasonable reliance goes away, that ability to say, it wasn't our fault because you've signed the return under penalties of perjury. So what I do for every single tax return for every single year, even tax returns that I've personally prepared and reviewed every single year, I still read every question on the tax form because it could change year over year because clients' circumstances may change year over year. So people who take on volumes of tax returns, who do taxes and think that they know what they're doing, especially with business returns, really usually don't. Because they go through stuff, they don't even read it, and Saly kicks in and tells them, "Oh, we've done it. We've always done it that way." I've had a client on board a couple of weeks ago, and their taxes have really been messed up by unlicensed preparers. Lots of different weird and outright wrong things. And so one of the spouses says, "Well, we've been doing it wrong for so many years. Shouldn't we just continue to do it wrong? Otherwise, we'll have a red flag or we'll have an audit." I laughed. I laughed because when you do things wrong, then when you are in the right, you can't prove it. You can't get what you deserve because you've been filing it wrong. So there's a lot of things going on, especially in accounting, especially in law and finance and IT with Saly. And honestly, it's not just those industries. It's a lot of them. I mean, when I started my career in tax, I was an accountant before that for about 5-6 years, a bookkeeper. And when I started my career in tax, I remember I would have a conversation with one of the partners of the firm, and they would say, "Well, we don't do it this way," or "We've always done it this way." And my next question would be, "Well, why not?" "Well, what if it's wrong?" And so I think that the real drag to us admitting the fact that we are misfits, many of us, that we don't comply with a certain way of the world, that we don't want to comply, that we don't have to comply. with a certain way of the world. Awareness of that and acceptance of that, I think, are the number one steps. And the obstacle that often prevents us from getting there sooner. I mean, it took me, 15 years to get there, to realize that I'm a misfit, to realize that I don't conform. It took me years to get there, and the real enemy is Saly. Saly has to go away. It's a disservice to clients, it's a disservice to businesses that you serve, if you serve businesses. It's a disservice to you if you're being served by professional services, whether it's accounting, tax, financial, law, consulting, or anything else, if people have a pattern of doing things. I've recently finished a book called Rebel Ideas. And the author there talks about cognitive diversity you'll hear me talk about it a lot because I really like the way he called it, but it's what I've been thinking about and what I've been practicing. When you keep learning and keep growing, which is why I'm a lifelong student, you bring diversity to a conversation. You bring skills. Maybe you don't know something 100% deep, but if you ever watch Law and Order, you will see how crimes are investigated. One attorney, one detective, or one person has a little bit more experience in golf, and it's a golf related case. They will be the one who will see stuff that nobody else will see because of their perspective, because of their cognitive diversity, because of their different background. That's how important it is. And we don't do it this way, or we've always done it this way. Will actually be the item that will cripple, and it can cripple industries. It can cripple careers, industries, and businesses. And, I expect to hear, and you would expect to hear, we've always done it this way from an accounting firm, from a finance firm, from a tax firm, from an IT firm potentially. But you don't expect to hear that from a TED stage. You've probably already seen a video that I've posted about TEDx denying to publish my talk. And I actually wanted to share with you the actual message that they've sent to the organizers. Thank you for uploading Tatiana's talk. We've identified the following issues with the talk. The TEDx stage is not a platform for professional or circuit speakers. Okay, so the question here I have for a TED is, TED stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. Okay. Do you enjoy people who have not been professionally trained to speak, deliver boring talks that barely get 100 views? Maybe you do. But then it's a very different business model than what TED stands for or should stand for. Then it says its purpose is to give a platform to those who don't often have one. So when I did my 3 talks, which I was invited to, right? When I did those, I had about 1,100 followers on Instagram, maybe 1,000, 2,000 connections on LinkedIn. When you say that its purpose is to give platform to those who don't have one, that's a double standard. That's a Saly, same as last year. It's also a double standard. And the double standard comes from hypocrisy, comes from every single famous person who have delivered a TED or TEDx talk on stage, some twice. Love Brene Brown, but she's done it twice at least that I've seen, probably more. To me, that's directly contradicting what they're saying here. So I mentioned earlier in this video that enemy number 1 of Misfits is Saly. We've always done it this way. Enemy number 2 is double standards. And this is exactly what you have. You have both Saly and double standards at organizations that you wouldn't expect it from. especially organizations standing for technology, entertainment, and design. Famous people have delivered many talks and they already have a platform. Many of them have huge platforms. Brene Brown books sell 1 million, 2 million a run, a launch. So when you say stuff like this, that's to me a double standard. Allowed for you, not allowed for you. Mm-mm. Bad business. And then they go on, and on about, if you want to read more, blah 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 blah. But when I saw this, I couldn't believe it. I am a huge opponent of double standards. I despise double standards, and I despise Saly. I think that the only way we can survive as a society and we can grow as a society, and every individual in it, is to practice what we preach. Do as I say, not as I do, does not work. Do as I do. That's the only thing that's going to work. I mean, think about it. I give you a lot of examples from an accounting industry because that's the industry that's near and dear to my heart, along with business. But in accounting, most tax preparers complain about two things. Well, recently has been lack of talent or lack of people who want to work or everything in between, people related complaints. But in the accounting industry, the second biggest complaint is that clients don't respect accountants. But how can you expect respect if you tell clients, send us stuff by this date or else, or you have to submit our stuff ASAP or whatever, where you yourself don't do the same thing for your own taxes? How does that work? That's a double standard at its core. And it's also hypocritical. If you tell someone else that they should be doing that they should be helping or giving back, start with yourself. You can't expect the world to change while you stay the same. You have to change first. And that's where we will talk about double standards as the enemy of being a misfit. So I've kind of always been struggling with unfairness, right? When something is unfair. And double standards are unfair. There are actually really terrible things that one can practice. But they happen all around us. They happen all the time. This example of TEDx banning my talk, which was my best actually, and it was very vulnerable and open, is just one of them. I was just shocked because I didn't expect it from an organization like that. But when you see it all the time in other places. Discrimination is a double standard, right? I've experienced that as a woman. I've experienced that as an immigrant. I learned to live with it. It's unfair. This fairness test, to me, is about single standards. That's my dog right there. It's about double standards, hypocrisy. Because what you tell others to do is completely misaligned with what you actually do for yourself. And in order for us to, what I've discovered is that it's not easy to live with unfairness being all around you. But what is something that you can control, which I found, which is an insight that I've discovered, is that you can control how you think about it. I've read a couple of books where they talked about one African American gentleman, was patient enough to listen and to ask the right questions and to really explain the gaps in logic, change the course of American slavery. Not slavery because it was abolished, but actually the aftermath that has been around for decades after it's been abolished. The discrimination and everything else. And he only did it by talking to people, by being bold and talking to people. And so, how he was bold to, how he was bold to do this stuff, to talk and to be open to a conversation, to be not a victim, but actually step out of it. And we'll talk about victims a lot more on this channel, but I think it's powerful when something like this happens, when people open their minds and look and examine their assumptions, their default modus operandi, how they operate, how they think, how they work, the patterns that they've learned, and everything else. Rebel Ideas book talks about the opposite. I mean, not the opposite, but the similar topic, but talks about white supremacy and how one Jewish person in college, basically by opening up his mind and heart, changed the course of this next protege of the white supremacy movement. Completely changed and reversed, and basically same exact approach. So it is possible to reverse unfairness, but it doesn't start by changing others. It starts with changing you. And I think that change also starts a lot with accepting the fact that you're a misfit, of accepting the fact that you don't fit in, and that's okay. And then always challenging yourself, always growing and learning and talking, and never thinking, I know it. The moment you say you know it, you will be tested hard on something like that. The moment you start complaining about something that you are not doing yourself, you're not practicing what you preach, so to speak, that moment is when you will again get tested by life or work or both. And so do this not because you're afraid of being tested, of the test, or whatever that test may be, right? Life throws curveballs. But this is to kind of show you how doing it this way keeps us where we are. Doing it the way we've always done it, Saly. Double standards where these people are allowed to do it and these people aren't. It will never work. You'll never be able to get out of that box. And so that's the enemy, number one, number two, number three, that we must address and attack right away. And I'll see you in the next video.